Are you an experienced software engineer, but you're frustrated with the hiring practices in our industry? Companies don't seem to treat you with any respect. They ghost you in the middle of the interview process and take no effort to get back to you. And you finally get a job, and then you're laid off in 5 or 6 months. Well, today I'm going to share a real coaching session I did with a client of mine. His name's Matt, and he's been through a similar situation over the last couple of years. I've worked with him off and on over the last 2 years, and he's really done a lot of amazing work himself to bring himself out of some pretty difficult circumstances to where he is today. And when I share this session with you today, I think what can be really helpful is to listen to Matt's story and listen to our conversation, but listen almost like I'm coaching you. I think you'll get a lot of insights for yourself hearing your own journey in Matt's story. And I hope as part of Matt's bravery to come on here and share what he's going through, it'll inspire you to keep going through whatever you're dealing with too.
Hey, pretty good to see you again. It's been 2 months, I think. It's been a little while. Yeah.
It has. It's been a little while. Yeah. And last time I talked to you, you had quite a few thoughts about everything you've been through. I don't know. It's been a little bit. What's going on?
Yeah, it's been a weird few months. Um, so it's funny. I applied for like two jobs around the time I think we last chatted. I think it was like early February, late January. Um, Pretty much got ghosted. It's been like 8 weeks.
Oh,
So that kind of
man.
sucks. It's a job search. But the positive side is I ended up getting a new counselor and sort of like just working through a lot of like deeper issues I've kind of had. And it's
Nice.
resulted in like a lot of journaling and kind of really figuring out a lot of what's been on my mind lately and like what really bothering me. And so it's actually been quite a positive time in a way. It's sort of weird, but I started to see the value in like sort of this awkward layoff period,
Yeah.
where it's like I can kind of see the transition, not so much as like it kind of sucks you have to go from like where you were before to somewhere else, but actually very like transformative, to the point where I'm like, oh, I kind of appreciate it, even if it's got some sucky parts. So I've been doing
Mm,
a lot of journaling, recognizing a lot of challenges I had. So, for example, feeling really burned out and
yeah.
realizing like, oh, a lot of the issues I was having just in life, like, oh, I'm eating out a lot or I'm not exercising as much. Like those are actually symptoms of the burnout. Instead of like,
Yeah.
oh, these are why I'm feeling burned out. It's actually, no, I'm really burned out. It's causing this. And so kind of been exercising a lot more. I've been going to the gym like 2 to 3 times a week.
Nice,
Been
man.
eating a lot better. I feel a lot healthier. My mind feels in a much better space. My partner and I, we bought bikes recently.
Nice.
So we've just been going for little bike rides. Sometimes it's perk when you're not working. You actually have time in the middle of the day just to go for a bike ride when it's quiet. So it's kind of a nice change. So yeah, it was like, oh, yeah, maybe I'm still feeling kind of burnt out. I didn't really think about that. And then realizing like actually burnout can take like maybe 2 years to even like get over. So it's kind of an
Yes.
interesting observation, or realizing like I've been going through a lot of like perfectionism, and I would have initially thought that perfectionism was more like an ego thing. Like, oh, I'm so great. I used to be really great. Like, I need to hold myself to some high standard or something. I started recognizing perfectionism is almost like actually self doubt. It's when
Mm,
you're actually not feeling great about yourself. And so you're trying to strive for some perfection that you can't really achieve,
yeah.
largely because it becomes avoidance for the facing that self doubt again. And I think that really started the trigger when I had applied for a few jobs and a few interviews back in December. And I had grinded for like 3 weeks in interview prep, gotten the two interviews, and immediately lost the first round on interviews. And it like really stung. And I think what that
Mm,
said to me was like, man, if you did 3 weeks of prep and you still weren't good enough, like, man, you gotta try even harder. Like you gotta have an even higher bar of quality for yourself. And that became kind of impossible early and
mm,
really unfair. And so it started to turn out into this avoidance of like, I didn't really feel like coding. I didn't feel like job searching. I didn't really feel like doing much of anything. It became like this really kind of crappy burnout depression state.
Sure.
But been working through that with like a counselor and like doing a lot of journaling. And actually, my mindset's kind of becoming a lot more optimistic, I'd say. And so I think that's actually been a valuable time, even if it isn't like the most productive time, so to speak. But it's something I think I've needed to work through and process. Um, so a few things I kind of been processing was like realizing maybe I'm still kind of burned out. Realizing I've got a lot of perfectionism, self comparison, a lot of self doubt, um, uncertainty, not really knowing where I'm going, trying to find like, oh man, if I keep writing, I'll find that perfect plan eventually. And I recognized I had written like 26 journals, each probably like 10 pages long in like the span of
Wow.
2 months. And I thought about a lot of things and it was really helpful. But eventually realizing like, okay, at some point I need to convert this to action. The journaling almost started to become avoidance for me on a bit. So
Hmm.
only in the past week that I really recognized that. So I've been trying to be like, I'm avoiding this because I'm trying to like do it perfectly. I want the perfect answer for where my career's going to go. I want certainty.
I can relate.
I want some stability. I want to know that when I'm working on something, it's going to pay off. And when you're job searching, it's a lot different than showing up to work every day and just picking up a ticket and do the ticket and then you get done, move on. And your job searching, there's a lot of ambiguity. You don't have a very clear idea of like, is this the right thing to do? It might be. But at the same time, maybe you just randomly walk into somebody while you're out one day and then they become a connection and they lead you to a job. Like you don't really know what's going to be the thing that works out, but you sort of have to try things imperfectly and
Yep.
figure it out. So I'm trying to move towards action and I'm trying to set the bar for myself like really low.
That's
More
good,
what that
man.
does is to act and then you have momentum in your role from it. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, bit of a rant.
No, that's okay. I haven't talked to you in a while, so I wanted to give you a little space to just kind of let me know like really how you're feeling, really what's going on. So I
Yeah.
remember last time we talked, I think you had told me about your new therapist counselor and that you were
Oh,
making
right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you were making some really good progress and
Mhm.
definitely and I'll try not to like speak to the audience too much, but just as a quick background, Matt and I have worked together, I think off and on for a little bit, maybe not quite
Year.
2 full years, but over a little bit, a couple times over the last 2 years,
Mhm.
maybe a year and a half. And yeah, you used to, when you were a little child, kind of want to run your own business. I know we talked about that was kind of one of your dreams as a
Yeah.
kid,
Yeah.
and that didn't come out, I think, until the second time you and I worked together, because mostly we were just talking about sort of like where to go as an employee at the beginning.
Mhm.
And I know, you had without getting into all the details, you've had some really big ups and some downs. And more recently, I feel like you've really been questioning, where do I go from here? And
Mhm.
we did that. I don't remember if it was called Healthy Dev Map when we did it, but Career Compass package, where we try to kind of figure out what direction you want to go. And I know at that time, you wanted to do more back end, you wanted to move and kind of like you wanted to widen sort of your skills to be considered more of a full stack dev.
Mhm.
And if I remember correctly, some of the reasoning for that was genuine interest in wanting to learn some new skills, but also it was like there was a person that kind of had given you a suggestion that like, well, if you really want to be valuable, this is what you need to do. And I know we both talked back and forth about like how much of this is based on what they said versus what you really want. And then we started talking about, well, what would it look like if you maybe went a totally different direction? You'd already done some team leadership. I gave you some compliments on when you'd shared, like when you were sort of in a lead role at two companies ago, how you really cared for your team. You were doing one-on-ones with a lot of people and you weren't even asked. I thought, wow, this is really a guy who cares a lot about his team. He has a lot of care for the culture and making sure that everybody who's working together, feels seen. And obviously that's really important in these software engineering positions where it's knowledge work. Anyway,
Mhm.
you know, through all that, I think it's really great what I'm hearing and what you told me last time is like you've and correct me if I'm wrong here, you've kind of recognized, hey, career's one thing, but I've also just got some sort of like just personal needs to kind of take better care of myself. It sounds like you were really making some great progress there. You're going, I don't remember if you said you're going to the gym or what you're doing, but you're basically exercising more often. You and your partner got bikes. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, since we're talking about career today, but as people will find as I record more of these and put them out, this bleeds from career into life in a lot of ways as we talk. Where are you sitting today with, the prospect of continuing to find employment and putting sort of a judgment on the next job, like it's got to be the right stepping stone for me in sort of the progression of where you should be from a corporate standpoint
Mhm.
versus are you looking at it as well, I need to get a job to pay my bills, but maybe I'm balancing that with something else that I might be doing that is more entrepreneurial. I don't know if you're still even entertaining that or if that's something you're
Yeah.
wrestling with. Yeah. So let me
Yeah.
hear
So
how
there's
you're
a few
feeling about that.
parts there. So there's the job searching side, and then there's like the entrepreneurship side to it. Um, so it's actually interesting. Like I really like the entrepreneurship side. That gets me really excited. I think part of full stack development that really excites me is actually building my own product or building my own service or being able to just build anything and put it together. And so just kind of like doing like one small side of it, it's really exciting to see the entire thing. I really like the
Mm-hmm.
system design. I do really like the leadership side. I get a lot of value out of like mentoring other developers. So the entrepreneurship side like really speaks to me and it goes back to like, I don't know, grade 7, 8, like high school. Like I
Yeah.
really want to start my own company. In fact, actually even kind of why I started programming in the first place was I wanted to start my own company and I'd start like, oh, can I make my own little web apps? Like and try to sell them or something? Like that was kind of a cool idea. I think where I'm at is there's a pragmatic side to it. And where I'm kind of thinking is like, well, I am in a fortunate situation to have a decent runway. I also recognize it genuinely takes a while to get a business up off the ground. Um, and it's just true. You especially get to a point where you could be making income. And pragmatically, I don't want to burn through all of my savings.
Right.
Got
I
to
understand.
balance it out. So what I'm trying to look at more is instead of trying to force myself into a situation where I need to build a business quickly and survive, and which I think puts a lot of pressure on and can actually lead to you making poor decisions. You're doing it
Mm-hmm.
more out of urgency than what is correct, I guess. Um, I'm more interested in actually like finding a job that facilitates eventually starting my own company. And that could be in a few ways. It could be like learning more full stack. It could be like taking on more leadership roles. It could be learning more about the business side, learning more about the product. It could just even be that it's a more chill place to work where I can actually have time and energy outside of work to be thinking about it. And a lot of people who I've sort of like researched into how to start a company, it seems like they often do have a job. They
Yeah.
started on the sort of on the side, and that job kind of gives you that foundation. You're not trying, so you can try to find customers. You can actually try to build a product. You can take your time to actually grow and get a business that's working, and
Well, let
then
me
transition
let
to it.
let,
Okay,
let me
yeah,
let me
okay,
let me let me try challenging just a little bit of what you're saying.
yeah,
And only because I think actually what you're talking about is crucial
yeah.
to walking into your next job with the right attitude. And it sounds like you're you're pretty much there, but I think there's a couple things I want to
Mhm.
make sure that I ask you about.
Sure, sure.
Um, so first is I agree that typically getting a business off the ground, I think and you know how statistics are, right?
Yeah,
There's always the exception. I think statistically, people will say about 3 years on average till it becomes like something that fully sustains you. Now, again, if you think about people though who are like very entrepreneurial minded, people who just like don't go towards typical employment kind of from the get-go, right? When they become adults or even before they're adults, they can be complete exceptions to this, right? And they just put their effort into it and it happens.
Mhm.
What I wanted to interrupt you with, I apologize for that, and just kind of ask you about was I hear this thought that, hey, a job is stable and I'll get a job and then on the side I can do this thing and maybe I'll do some leadership, maybe I'll do some product management. And I definitely get that from a like I hear you not wanting to make sort of knee-jerk decisions, right? That are based on like a feeling of too much urgency where you make an unwise decision. What I wanted to
Mhm.
flip the script for you though, and just ask you is it possible to look for a job when you already have runway like you do? Is it possible to look for a job in urgency as well?
Mhm. Yeah, and so that's actually something I had been journaling quite a bit. It's like when I would look at certain jobs over the years, there's obviously some that were I think were a great fit, and there were maybe some that were less of a great fit. And I think part of that can be this urgency you're placed under, in part maybe initial pressure, or
Yeah.
right, you just like you just need to find something, or you're in a place that you don't really like, and you're like you need to find that next place, and so there's this urgency under it. I think last year was interesting for context here. I had I call it a career break last year for 8 months,
Yeah.
and then I took a job for 5 months and was laid off. Um, but it's sort of interesting because I'm like kind of getting to redo my time off last year in a way. And last year, I
Mm-hmm.
think I had a lot of ideas of how I would approach a career break. Oh, like I want to do a lot more learning, but that career break ended up becoming mostly job searching, which was
Mm-hmm.
not really what it was meant to be. It was actually meant to be a break where I spent a lot more time learning and exploring things. And while I did a part of that, I felt a lot of pressure to jump into something. And interestingly, I jumped into a job which, and ended up 5 months later laying off 80% of the company.
Well,
Um,
let
okay.
me again steer this a little right there because that's kind of the crux of it, which is like we were working together
Yeah.
before and you got a great new job. It gave
Yeah.
you now I know when you got in there and you started learning some of the new front end, you were like, I like React better. I'm more used to that. We will get into all that,
Yeah.
or maybe we won't get into all that. But
Mhm.
what happened is you did find a better job. It was very intentional. I remember you had another company that was offering you a lot more money, but you
Mhm.
took the job that seemed like it was going to let you recover from the burnout better and just really do a great. You loved the culture. I remember. I think it was the CEO even told you, "Hey, our people, we really care about like if they're not feeling good," and like you got a lot of really
Yeah.
good signs. Now, again, you get the job. Sometimes it doesn't play out exactly like that, but still, even when you had started, I was hearing some really positive things. And at the end, you got laid off, not because you made a bad decision, not because it was
Mhm.
a bad company, because it was just the luck of the draw. And so the reason I asked you the question before is I hear you saying, hey, I don't want to pursue self employment out of urgency and make an unwise decision. That's smart. My
Mhm.
question, though, is if you've got runway and you could pursue self employment or a job, is it possible to say, I'm going to pursue a job because it's safe, but actually history shows you otherwise?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of true. It's sort of it's interesting because like you kind of look at it as a job as like it being more of a safe thing, but the reality is like I did that last year and here I am again. Where something I actually find really exciting about the entrepreneurship side is even just like, hey, go build it your own, go build your own product. Just as a developer, I think you learn so much more doing that than you would just picking up a ticket at work because it's just dependent on what your manager gives you.
When
So it's like a lot of personal growth. Okay, yes, sir.
remember how and I'm only interrupting you because we've worked together so
Yeah,
much. I'm trying to get you to a spot because I
yeah,
think you're at a spot where there's some actions that potentially
yeah.
you could start taking to really start making some progress on this. I think you're right there. Um,
Mhm.
and correct me if I'm wrong with this story. I'll give you the high level, but you explained something about you were, I don't remember if you were at a trade show or an airport. You were somewhere and you saw some product, and it involved technology, and you just had this reflection, this moment. Gosh, that's cool. Somebody did that. Somebody brought this thing to life. They made it. I could maybe do that. And I'll tell you, from knowing you, Matt, we've spent quite a few hours together. I have no doubt you could build whatever the hell needs to be built. You've built so much software over your career. I mean, I think that's not going to be not that there's not challenging and learning, and that you've done that endlessly. The challenge is the other side, the discovering a business problem where it's an opportunity to invest in, so that what you're building, you actually have something to sell to a market that has an appetite for what you're offering. And I've talked about in one of my other episodes on the show how the first two startups I tried to do, I focused too much on creating a product that was interesting for me to build. Now, I did care about the customer. I'd like to think I wasn't just like, well, I'm going to build something with absolutely zero business value. But I still was a little too, I'm going to pick a tech stack and a business problem that I'm going to enjoy coding. And what I can say is, one thing I've learned, and I'm just one person, so, take it with a grain of salt, as I always tell you. One thing I've learned is that it actually takes a lot simpler solution with actually a lot less moving pieces to start a successful business than I think we as engineers think, because we're paid to solve complicated problems. I mean, if you think about, if you go get a job at Google, the reason you're paid so much is not just because I'm working at a company that can afford to pay me more, because Google obviously can. It's because the scale and complexity of the problems they face are really challenging. If you're starting a business, you're not, obviously, no, you're not Google, but like you're not going to be establishing yourself in a market by bringing to market a complex solution that requires a whole team and all. If you're going to be a solopreneur, so to speak, you have to bring something forth that you can build and you can sell and you can market and you can be the product manager, essentially the person who talks to your potential customers. You're kind of wearing, this is what I do. You're wearing all those hats. If what I offered, now I do have Dev Pathfinder today and I have something else I'm working on, but if I offered was some, 3-tier, 6-tier, 7 microservices insane thing as my first product, I'd probably still be building it today, and I'd have no idea if anybody's even willing to buy it. So I'll stop there. But what I wanted to ask you is, maybe I can't give you the ultimate answer with, well, really anything. This is your career, but with which job you should get next or how you should approach that. I do want to encourage you, though, since I've started coaching you, that like you're a really smart guy. You have a lot of empathy for the user. You know how to lead people. Is there any way you could start to take some steps to begin to explore potential markets that have problems, to try to see if any of those problems are a simple enough of a software potentially solution that you could solve them without having to hire a team? Basically you'd be looking for a problem in an existing market where the customer hopefully is already doing it today, but they don't like their solution. Maybe it's not automated. Maybe it is. And that you can build it on your own. You can get it to, an MVP in front of them, like think 2 months, a month, something fast where you can start to get some feedback. What do you feel when you hear me even say that? Does that sound too pie in the sky, unrealistic? Just be real with me. Like, how do you feel when I even quote that? Yeah.
So the fun thing is, I feel I already have that.
Okay.
Which, let me elaborate on this. So, me personally, having gone through many layoffs recently, I also know many people who are laid off. So, and I see a lot of developers who are really struggling right now. The thing is, with my last layoff, I started like a study group where we started practicing interview questions together. We would start doing like lead code or system design, and I basically like have a little group who I would meet up with like once every 2 weeks or something, and we do mock interviews. And I could actually see where developers were struggling, and I would see them going through these actual pain points. They want to get back to a job. I would also see us very willingly spending money on courses to do these things. You'll easily
Okay.
spend $100 or $200 on a course if it can lead to you getting a job again. The ROI is pretty much immediate. And a lot of what I'm actually seeing here is there's a recurring type of interviews, and the material is very fairly well known. Go learn data structures, algorithms, system design, um, practice mock interviews. And a lot of times what people kind of need is like clarity. And so I've had this idea, even just to build for my own self while job searching, is like, hey, what if I just made almost like a simple flashcard thing that gives you a problem of the day to go solve? And you can kind of just, it's giving you something to do to keep practicing for system design or code interviews. And that's fairly simple. You don't even have to build a user system. You can actually just do that as a front end and just do little flashcards and maybe use something in local storage to save your progress or something like that. Um, I have people who would use it. I would personally use it. And I know people who actually would because they're in the situation. I probably in like mentoring and talking to them. And I have a lot of developers who are going through these struggles. And I think that clarity and direction for job searching and getting better interviews is should be quite good. It also ties into a lot of like what I'm personally interested in. I'm personally interested in data structures, algorithms, system design myself. Personally interested in building a project. And kind of ties in a lot. So, also just like from a value perspective, I'm not a competitive person. And what I mean by that is I'm someone who actually prefers collaboration. I get a lot more joy out of mentoring other people and teaching people. I really like learning myself.
Hmm.
And it just really feels like something that aligns with me because it's like you're building something that I recognize, I see genuinely many people struggling with that I'm personally struggling with, and you're helping them out. And I did like just is fine, actually just genuinely really meaningful to me. And I also do have an audience of people who would actually want to use that. And I know they would pay because I've literally seen them buy it as similar things.
Well,
So, so there's that.
I think it's I love hearing the energy and the passion you have behind the prospect of doing this. Like I
Mhm.
love that. There's a couple things though I want to ask you about because I
Yeah.
think they're worth seeing how you feel about them.
Mhm.
But and before we even get into those, I want to ask you. You made the statement, "I'm not a very competitive person. I really enjoy collaboration and teaching." Why do you think that is? What do you is? Do you have a certain adversity to competition? Is there was there an event where you maybe I don't want to call her. Why don't you
Yeah.
just tell me
It's
why do you think that is? Yeah.
it's not even like from a programming perspective. It's just like something just as a personality, like, playing multiplayer games, like a racing game. Like, I don't really enjoy losing. That's sort of thing. But also, like, I just enjoy it more when we're working together on a problem.
Well,
This
hold
is
on a second.
yeah, sure, sure.
Hold on a second. I really don't enjoy losing. That
Right.
doesn't sound like a person who doesn't want to. That actually sounds like someone who is competitive, but who maybe lost one or twice and uses that as a justification to say they don't want to compete. I think you are competitive. Here's why.
Okay.
You had a dream to work at this one company. It's not the last one, it's the one before it. I won't name them, but right, you always thought,
Yeah.
man, I'd love to work there. You worked there. I think you said your niece was impressed by that you worked there. You took
Mhm.
a lot of pride that you were at this company. Then when you were there, you eventually moved up into somewhat of a technical leadership position. You
Mhm.
continued to grow. You had people challenging you, and even though it was frustrating, and one of the people who challenged you, you and I worked together, was I don't want to call people names. Very difficult person to deal with. Very
Sure.
difficult person to deal with. That I can see why encountering that person would probably, if I were you, which I'm not, but I probably would have taken on some maybe resentment a little bit for having dealt with that. It maybe also would have caused me to second guess my progress in my career a little bit. And I know you've done a lot of work with your therapist and reflecting on that since.
Mhm.
But I just want to pause to ask you, I mean, do you really believe that it's true that you are not competitive by nature?
Hmm. Well, it's kind of interesting. There are some things like to compete on. Like I remember doing time trials in Mario Kart a lot. I got really upset when my friend beat me, and then I didn't want to play anymore. So I didn't like that.
See, that's what I mean,
I,
though. That's what I
yeah.
mean, though. What what would it look like if you went forward in your life and you said, I'm not going to let getting beat be a reason to
Hmm.
stop trying?
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that comes down to like self-comparison a lot. And there's like a sense of like needing to be better than other people. It's funny. I'm okay. I'm looking off to the side right now. I'm just going to point this out. Um, I have this book literally on speed running,
Nice.
which is literally about getting your fastest time in games, and beating other people. So I'm like, it's kind of funny that we're talking about just staring me in the face while we're having this conversation. Um, anyway, I if I wasn't competitive, I think there is like that sense of like needing needing to be better than other people instead of being better than yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and you can often have standards that are really unfair because you're comparing it to people who are like experts or
Yes.
a lot of advantages than you.
I can relate.
And I think you start to recognize like your disadvantages or things that might be a little more uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's like you feel like you're losing for like due to unfair reasons.
Yep.
Random examples. I'm from Canada. We just get paid less, right?
Right.
Like, and so it's annoying. Like I'll talk to a developer who's like 10 years younger than me, being paid more than I am as a, and they're like an intermediate developer making more than I was as a lead. It's just what it is, but it has nothing to do with me being a lesser
I
developer.
but
It's
you're
just
making but you're making a decision, and I've talked about this. You don't have to stay in Canada. I know
right.
you've
Yeah,
got
yeah,
good reasons. You've explained them to me, and I think they're valid. But if you're going to
yeah.
choose to stay there, does it really serve you to say I've got this disadvantage? I mean, I have to be
Hmm.
a little bit careful. I'm not trying to tell you that it's not valid to feel that way sometimes, but I'm saying, is that helpful to,
Mhm.
because again, that's a little bit of a comparison. Again, you're looking at, well, if I was in the US, I just make more money, and I'm not, oh, this sucks, which
Right, right.
I get that. Well, let me just steer back, because I wanted to explore that only to say, um, and this is your session, so I promise I won't make this about me, but I'm just going to add a little anecdote here. Um, I actually had an episode last week when I saw another person somewhat adjacent to me in just an aspect of what I do
Mhm.
get really successful with something or just take a big step. And my initial reaction was to be all pissed and frustrated and depressed and like, oh, well, I waited too long, or that should be me. And my wife was just like, you're miserable. Like, meaning like she's a very compassionate woman, but she was also just like, I can't believe how, bad you're letting this bend you out of shape. Like, you got all these things going for you. You just had somebody on YouTube that you coached. You've always wanted to do that. Ben, which was a couple weeks ago, she's like, you're working on this new program, which I'll talk about in the future. She's like, just worry about the stuff you're doing.
Mhm.
And what I've found is like, I actually am a very competitive person. And where I do well self-employed with my competition is when I compete against myself with how well I can serve my customers. So, like, for example, when I used to create documentation as a consultant, I would go to really kind of a ridiculous levels to like style things well and have them really easy to read. And I put a lot of pride and craft into my documentation. And there
Mhm.
were always other developers that appreciated it. And the management would also appreciate it to a level, but they didn't appreciate it to the level that I put effort into it, because I was kind of treating it almost like a product. like something that I figured like this is the core thing that this it's actually going to make money for the business when it's not. It's really just kind of a maintenance artifact for development. When I
Yeah.
work for myself, when I create a survey that, you or somebody fills out, when I create a video to explain, which I just did that recently. It used to be, I don't know if you probably remember this when you and I first met, I did a little presentation at the beginning. Do you remember that at
Yeah.
all? Yeah, so I
Hmm.
turned that into a video now. And it's a decent video. And now I don't have to give the presentation every time. So it gives more space for the consultation. But like, I mostly did that because I was like, man, if I was a customer of me, I would be impressed and I would love if there was like a pre-shot video that went through everything and it was really good. Like that would excite me. I'd go into that session thinking, awesome, this guy took the time to create this really great onboarding video. So I just say that to say, like, ever since I've worked with you, like, you definitely take a lot of pride in everything that you do. And I think, maybe you don't want to compete against individuals, and that maybe that's a good thing where you're at right now. But,
Hmm.
if you were to go into, you're talking about potentially, hey, I've got this little side community where I've helped them with interviewing. Um, Maybe I even have this flashcard thing. Your competitive nature could think about how do I serve the people with that solution I'd be building in a way that's better week after week, month after month, year after year than what I started
Hmm.
with, and let that sort of be the North Star that you're pointing towards when you make decisions in your career. Maybe still have the day job, but like the competitive part of you, the part of you that wants to push the needle, having it be something that you truly control and benefit from, even if it takes longer to get off the ground. Now, again, I'm not, I'll come back to your idea
Yeah.
in a second, but just
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
conceptually, what do you think when I kind of throw that out there? How does that make you
It's it,
feel? What's your
it's
reaction?
funny because going back to the competitive side, it's like I recognize there's actually probably a lot more competitiveness than I think there is. Learning is a good example. Like I would be like learning constantly. I want to be better than other developers, or like even thinking like, oh, I'm comparing myself to other developers. Like I want to compete against them. I want to be better than them. It's like I don't want to be less than them. It's like what I have right now isn't good enough. But it is actually interesting because it is a drive. But I think there's a sense of like maybe comparing to myself unfairly to others, or people who just like are just way ahead of you for various reasons, and that's like makes you kind of feel crappy. But I think there actually is quite a little bit of competition now that I've even talking about it. Um, yeah, it's interesting 'cause I haven't like thought of myself as someone competitive for like a long time, but I think it is just like a discomfort to it.
Mm.
Like, oh, it's like wrong to be competitive, or it's like wrong to win because if you win, someone else loses. It's like thinking of it as like a zero sum game, but it's not always zero sum. Um,
Well, let me throw out
yeah.
there something that's helped me. So when I started doing this 5, 6 years ago, when you searched Google, if you search for software engineering coach or whatever, I
Mhm.
was number one, and there was almost nobody else out there. It was like a very new. I think there was a Reddit post that was like, does anybody ever hire software engineering coaches? No, like I wouldn't trust him anyway. It was like nobody's even
Yeah.
bothering. There was like one guy who worked for Twitter that tried to do it and then he just gave up because nobody would hire him. And I in my in my competitive nature was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the first one to do it. I'm going to get people to trust me. I'm actually going to try really hard to get them results. I've been a developer. I know how freaking skeptical they are. And man, I not a week goes by where I question whether that was the right decision because it's really hard to help engineers. Um, so some of them, right? Like people like you're much more humble. You kind of knew, hey, I could use possibly some help, and that whole industry has exploded. I'm not number one now. There's companies that now have like whole networks and they're way cheaper than me. It's kind of like anybody can be a coach now. And
Yeah.
hey, great. I'm not so competitive that I want to make other people lose, which is a bit of what you're talking about. It's like, hey, there's enough in this industry for everyone. However, if I have someone come to me and they go, yeah, I tried working with this other engineering career coach. They really sucked. I want to see if maybe you'd be better. And then they start working with me and they're like, this is great. Of course I feel good about that. Now I don't feel, I hopefully don't feel good because I'm like, think, because I don't even know who the other person was. And I'm thinking, oh, it's good that they didn't get business. That's not what I'm thinking. But I am thinking, wow, you know, I was able to help this person who did not get help from someone else. I guess I'm doing something right, and
Right.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and so when I think this is kind of getting to brass tacks though here, when I think about your helping people with interviewing, there were two things that popped into my head that I know are going to be these questions that you probably wish that I didn't ask you, but I'm asking you them. I'm asking you them because I really care about you, and I think they're worth just exploring. And I'd love for you to come back maybe next time we talk, or again, you're in
Mhm.
Discord with me or something like that. The first one is just that when you're entering a new market or providing a new solution for which there's no existing solution, like when I first started doing engineer career coaching, it wasn't that nobody was doing it, but like the people who were doing it were hardly known at all. They didn't have YouTube channels. This was 7 years ago. It was a totally different situation than it is today. Really, your biggest challenge is getting people to believe that there's even a reason that they might try this thing that you're offering that doesn't seem to have existing competition yet. So
Mhm.
it's you're trying to open the mind of people to like, hey, what if you as an engineer, which I know engineers are DIYers, right? We're like, I don't need help. I'll figure this out. I figured everything else out. Why would I need coaching? Like, right? That's how a
Mhm.
lot of them are. And that's how I was. Um, so like a lot of my challenge was just, hey, it's okay to not do everything yourself. Like there is some value in getting some perspective. And some people need
Mhm.
that, some don't. It's not a judgment. But once a niche or a market is established, my understanding from my own experience and from, the couple startups I tried, you really have to have either a 10x improvement in the value that used to be there. I'll explain some examples in a second. I think you know this already when you hear me even saying it. Or you have to have a really sexy, standout, completely transformative, and by transformative, it could just be way simpler user experience that is just so much better for the customer that despite how much even features wise the other solution maybe is, they're just so much more bought into this. And the two examples I'd give is the first one is like Uber, like
Mhm.
despite, let's not get into Uber's
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
business practice questionable decisions. This isn't the place for that. But they figured out the economics behind finding people a much cheaper ride somewhere and creating a two-sided market, which, a two-sided market is where you have a customer can make money in the market and a service provider being the Uber driver, right? They created a new business with two sides, which is kind of one of the best ones you can create, but it's a lot more complicated. So that was, again, I don't know if it was 10x, but gosh, Uber's huge, right? Like they completely decimated the taxi cab industry in a lot of ways. Then you've got Apple, very classic case of a company who, the iPhone, not everybody's going to agree with this, is not really as functionally rich as Android in some areas. It's maybe not as flexible, but the
Mhm.
elegance of the design, um, the kind of aesthetic of it, the status of it, people will pay more even for it because it's just such a great experience that people really love the experience of the iPhone, you know, typically most of the people
Yeah.
who do
Yeah.
like it. And so when I mention this to just say, maybe as a couple homework inquiries, I give people these in coaching sometimes, and you could just do these for your own fun
Mhm.
and hopefully improvement. A couple questions you could ask yourself is, what could you offer with this group you're creating, the potential flashcard solution, it sounds like you've done a variety of things. You've helped review where people are at, right? What could you do within that could produce potentially, and I'm not saying you have to do this, it's just a question to challenge yourself, a 10x improvement in how the value people get out of interview prep work or support or assistance before. And I'm not saying it has to be 10x across all aspects of interview preparation. That's probably too aggressive to expect of yourself.
Yeah.
But just some part of this experience that you've kind of been part of, is there a way you could do some research? See, how do people go about this part of it today? Who are the existing competitors? How much, what are the stats on the progress on it? How much do they charge? Maybe it's 10x cheaper too. Maybe there's 10 times more people to help with the process. So by 10x value, it doesn't have to be profit, how we'd think of from a business standpoint. It can be any kind of business value driver. There's about 8 of them, and we could get into that some other time. So that would be one question. Maybe just brainstorm, hey, what could possibly be 10x better in my idea? And then the other thing is there something you could do in your idea where it doesn't have to be really better than anything else out there from a measurable KPI monetary standpoint, but the experience of it, the experience of either the support that they get, the materials, the care that's given to them during engaging with you, the, aesthetics. This is where it takes a lot of creativity. And honestly, this exercise you've been doing and taking care of your mind and your body is going to juice you up to be able to really come up with great stuff here. But this would be where you're just thinking, is there something in the experience of this that could be so compelling and differentiating and cool and exciting that people be like, yeah, I want to give this a chance, even if the thing it does could be, like you said, flashcards, but maybe it's just it's such a low barrier of entry. Now, obviously, you could come up with a 10x improvement in value and or a better experience, and it still has to translate to there being enough customers that will pay enough that it's worth your time. That's the business model portion of your idea. But, I've always felt, and this has just been my experience since I got into career coaching, if you love a group of people enough and you do see a pain point that you want to solve enough and you're committed enough to making it happen, you'll find a good solution. And now, is it going to be the most profitable idea on earth? Not necessarily, right? There's trade-offs in that. But again, I know I just said quite a few things. I'm going to pause there. What do you think about looking at your idea just, from these two different angles? Would this even be helpful? Do you have any reservations or objections to what I'm saying?
No, I think it's really great ideas. And I had an initial thought, one thing I constantly see people doing is you're just reading material, where I think you actually learn the most is by building projects. And I think that's harder for maybe someone to deliver compared to you can write a leak code problem in the web browser, or you can read this document or watch this video. It's I want you to build a project. That's where you actually learn. but how do you sell that? So go do the work. It's been interesting, but I think there's something there because that's something I've been stumbling on a lot. It's I'm bored of reading tutorials and videos. I actually want to build shit, and that's when I actually learn something. So can I maybe turn that piece into something? It'd be really interesting.
Let me throw out there a suggestion for you, and I'm really curious. People who watch this, that if they did get all the way through, because these are always longer. Leave some comments, guys, if you got some ideas. In a way, I think you might want to look at the other side of this market. This is a two-sided market. Here's an example. You know how I'm pretty sure at least HackerRank does this. I don't remember if LeetCode does this too. And I have not been private about my issues with both of those products, but I understand, hey, they're businesses. They have a right to do what they do. You've got, for HackerRank, for example, you've got the customer side of the business, which is people who are paying for HackerRank, let's say higher level versions of it, so they can take as many, questions as possible. They can get more solutions. There's different money that HackerRank can make off of the people who are using it to study. and get better. And then there's a portion of it where employers can select pre-selected questions on HackerRank, and they can search and they can try to have them be somehow related to their solution.
Hmm.
I think this part of HackerRank sucks, and I hope I don't get a whole bunch of heat, but whatever. That side, meaning the employer, what I feel today is that these tools don't do a very good job at all of truly pre-qualifying a candidate to see, okay, let's say I'm hiring a senior or a lead engineer. I'm not going to just need them to write algorithms. I'm going to need them to make sure that as my code base evolves, patterns are introduced to keep complexity under control. They're not an over-engineerer, meaning they just, go too much with moving parts, because you've heard of the concept of architecture astronauts. They go so high in levels of abstraction they run out of air. I love that one. Right. You don't want to hire someone like that, but there's juniors that can come out of Stanford with incredible algorithmic capabilities and mathematic abilities. But I would never put a person, I don't care how great they are with algorithms, as the lead on a project that has like a React front end and microservices and a CI/CD environment and integration with third-party partners and a whole bunch of custom frameworks for like processing data between multiple endpoints that have to like wait on each other in certain states. There they do it? Sure, but could they scale the architecture in a way where they're making intelligent decisions on the trade-offs? I'm not saying there aren't people that are more talented and natural at that than others. I do think, though, more experienced engineers have the ability to make smart, wise, measured decisions about that I would not want to trust, a hotshot, amazing individual coder. So I only say that to say, and I'm not saying this is what you should do with your idea. This is your idea. I'm just kind of throwing out some thoughts. The other side of this market of your idea, not just the people you're helping interview, the people who would be like, well, what if we interviewed candidates who've gone through Matt's interview prep process, and it actually raised our confidence that the person we're interviewing, he's validated aspects of them that are beyond typical algorithmic tests. These are actually maybe, higher order thinking that's usually more associated with a more experienced person, that can, let's be honest, you've been on these projects. You can make decisions about architecture that bring the productivity of an entire team of 15 people to its knees because it's overly complicated. By then, like the amount of damage you're doing compared to, I had to look up some Wikipedia articles on how to do big O notation for some calculation I don't know because I didn't do recently. I mean, the impact on that versus bad architecture decisions, again, it's somewhat contextual, very different. So I'll just kind of end there, but I mostly wanted to just recommend, because I think this is an idea, and even if this isn't the idea, it's really great for you, Matt, to spend at least a little bit of your time when you're up for it, because I know you're trying to recover, from everything that's happened. Keeping the hope alive that, like, yeah, you're a great developer. Yeah, you've been an amazing individual contributor, but like you're also a very curious person. You like to learn, and there's limits to how much learning we can do with coding. There's also the learning of business, and I think you've had a genuine fascination with that from the beginning.
Yeah, no, that definitely. Sorry, definitely like the business side and the product side, and I think that's ultimately what you're kind of building the software for. And it's easy to get lost in the technical details, but it's like, what am I actually building and what problems am I actually solving? I find like that's what really gets me going as a developer. So yeah, lots to think about there. Lots of things to journal.
So if you were to come up with, let's say, a list of 5 to 10 potential ways to look at this idea that could be positioned as a 10x improvement of some way, and then maybe a list of 5 to 10, and these are just arbitrary numbers, aspects of this that could be differentiators or really like attractive, really aesthetically cool, just really the experience is really, really great. And then maybe 5 to 10 kind of product positioning statements that you could give to employers to actually help them understand the value in considering a candidate who's been through your program or used your flashcards. Um, is that something you're interested in doing?
Yeah, that is actually pretty interesting. Because it's funny because I came from like the developer side because it's where I see, but it's like, oh, but there's like the other side where, even going back to the beginning of this call, it's like, oh, I applied for a job. I've been ghosted for 2 months now waiting for it. And it's probably because they're kind of inundated with so many applications that they just can't really get back to everybody. So there is like a beneficial side for all the employers too. And like it, it, just solving leak code problems is much different from actually building software. And the impact of making a bad architecture decision is like incredibly costly and can last in the code for a long time. Something else I think a lot of developers struggle with is they think of building the code, and that's the thing. It's like you wrote the code, it's done. It's like actually, no, that code lives for years. Like you have to maintain it. Someone has to support it. Someone who doesn't even work here right now is going to show up one day and be like, "What the hell did you guys do?" And there's like little things like just naming variables clearly has a lot of impact for that long term. Um, but that actually is very costly, and I think that's what part of software development that I actually find really engaging. Like really caring about the product and the business and the developers and maintenance and all that. It's more
Yeah,
than
and
just writing code.
yeah, and I mean, obviously we have code analysis tools today, right? We could run code analysis on code bases. What if like, people do some, I don't know if it's architecture work or they write a couple React components or, whatever it is. And instead of
Mhm.
just like, here's the answer, let's have the interviewer see if you had the right answer. What if they had code coverage metrics or like cyclomatic complexity calculations or, things that tell them those are very simple. You'd want to come up with
Right,
something
right.
that's a little more innovative and interesting. But, as with any engineering thing, I guess the one thing I'd caution you with is what I said at the beginning of the session, which is we tend to think that our solution has to be way more complicated to be of value because we're used to justifying our value to an employer. An employer is looking at us as a, grab bag of multiple capabilities. When you're a business, that business, for example, may still use HackerRank, God forbid, as part of their interview process. Maybe excuse me, you're only building their confidence in the candidate, let's say, in one thing, just one thing that they can't do today. But that one thing, let's say you find some research out there that talks about when companies hire engineers and they don't validate this aspect of the engineer, here's, some, and I don't know that there are some studies done on this because our industry is very like buzz driven with very little research. People don't like to say this, but
Mhm.
um, anyway, I'll stop there, man, because we're getting kind of at the end here. But really, just want to encourage you, Matt. Man, you're a smart guy. We've worked together quite a bit. I always feel a little sad when I hear the amount of struggles you've been having getting a job. But the other part of me that I think is, well, is there an element of maybe this is a sign that does this mean you stop pursuing employment altogether? I hope you don't hear me saying that. That's not what I'm saying. This is your career. You have to ultimately walk out these decisions and deal with the consequences. But there's
Mhm.
at least part of me that thinks if you started to put effort towards building the skills that you would need to be an entrepreneur, every day that you don't do that is a day that, you're just kind of kicking it down the road. And at some point, like for me, I know my story's a little different than yours, but, I had to stop putting that off and go, this week I'm going to learn about email marketing. And I'm not going to stop until I like have got a trial account and I've set up an email address and I've opted in and seen what happens. And, okay, now I know if I need to market people on email whatever that is. And for you, even if, let's say you go through this activity and you find, I can't really find a super compelling 10x and, reason, or I can't really find a super compelling differentiator, or I can't really find super compelling reasons why the employer would want to use it. Here's the benefit. You just went through the experience of validating a business idea.
Right,
Validating,
yeah.
I think people think validating a business idea means that it's a successful business. No, validating a business idea is being objective and applying some criteria to it and going, it's not a good idea, and moving on, having learned something from that process. So I
Mhm.
don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying your idea is a bad idea. I don't know that. I don't know really. I haven't explored that market, but anything that you do to start to really take actions like a person starting up a company, even if it's a solopreneur company, um, that is not time wasted. That's time you're investing in what you're going to have to do no matter what you do.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's very true. I actually have a course on entrepreneurship that I bought years ago. That basically
Nice.
goes from like setting up your own small business. Um, Maybe I should go back to working on that. I thought it was a good place to start, just even know what I'm talking about. So,
That's cool, man. Yeah. I mean, you've heard me talk about this in my learning addiction video, but I think if you got a course, just do it. Like the key is like there's so much knowledge. We get this false sense of accomplishment just by, I can go on YouTube every day of my life and learn 8 hours a
yeah,
day and
yeah,
get this false, like, oh my gosh, my mind, it's been expanded. And then you ask me next week, hey, what did you learn from that video? What'd you do with it? Nothing. Literally
right,
nothing. So like I
yeah,
have to protect myself from learning now and really only learn just what I need to take my next action in my business. Yeah. Otherwise I don't take action. I just learn. Yep.
yeah, yeah. That's actually it's very true. I think it's helpful to have the material as a reference, but it's a bit different from when you just need to like sit down and keep doing a course, right? It's like if you use a course, you just learn and learn and learn, but nothing comes out of it. But if you have it as a reference point, it's like you're going through the process, you're directing, and then when you have a question about something, you can go look it up. I think that's a better
Yeah,
approach, actually.
yeah, I'm not actually as anti of courses as some people
Oh,
are.
okay.
I think a well-designed course that actually has processes that you're expected to complete before you move on, and it doesn't let you just like, oh, let me just fly through and read everything I'm going to do in the course and then get the feeling that I did the course. That sucks. You almost got to gate people like, sorry, you're not moving on to the next chapter until you actually complete this, because otherwise, why even call it a course? It's just a book at that point. So like I know there's a lot of engineers who for good reason are skeptical of courses. There's a lot of crap courses out there, but a course for someone who can't afford like coaching or something like this, it can still be very valuable if it's set up to take good action. So like this course you bought, I'd say you spent good money on it, you know,
Mhm.
finish the damn course, and take the actions.
Yeah,
And even if at the end you're like, some parts of it I like, some parts of it I don't know if I do them that way. Cool. You just learned a little better how you would go about business.
yeah. It's like, yeah, you can go look into that again. It's only a few, like it's only a few weeks long or something anyway. It's pretty short. So yeah,
Nice.
at least it'll give me like a lot more knowledge of where to even begin. Because sometimes you just like feel overwhelmed. Like, how do you start a business? There's so many questions there, legal stuff, finance stuff. Like, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but like at least it kind of like starts to clarify things a bit more. So there's still
Yep.
value in doing it. But yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of excitement towards like starting my own thing. And there's just like a lot of like fear, but it's like I keep getting kind of brought back to it. And it's kind of interesting because it's sort of like where I began.
Mm.
It's like what I wanted to do in the first place. So it's like you have an exciting opportunity to kind of go back and finally do that dream you wanted to do as a kid.
Well,
It's
hang in
kind of
there,
fun.
Matt. I I
Yeah.
I, I think you owe it to yourself to at least probably explore some of this a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you find that it's not, happening as fast as you'd like, and even if you're still like, I think I've told you I had to do consulting, 20 to 30 hours a week for the first 5 years that I did this business, until I could go full
Mhm.
time on career coaching. So Now that's because I also had, I was recovering from marijuana addiction and the burnout I've talked about in that episode, but which is why I hope for many people it doesn't take that long. But I'm sitting here today. I'm running my own business. I haven't been a W-2 employee for 7 years. I've
Oh, wow.
done consulting contracts or coaching for the last 7 years, and it's had ups
Hmm.
and downs. And, again, I've had health problems that a lot of other people don't have, but that beside, I don't see any foreseeable future where I would ever be an employee again. I don't think
Interesting. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not necessary at this point. And I
yeah.
believe too much in my ability to create what needs to be created to continue to grow my business. Even if some of the things I create end up being crap or it's the wrong thing or I find out it's the wrong direction, I'll adjust and keep going. I've at least got some momentum. But that was because I've
Mhm.
took step after step after step, and I made video after video after bad video, especially at the beginning. And just there. Of course, there's going to be fear, but like, don't let I would just say everything you've done probably meaningful in your life, there was some element of fear until you did it.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. It's always just the nature of making a change
Yep.
comes with the unknown.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
man. Well,
It's great chatting.
you feel okay where we're ending this? Do you feel like you got some thoughts of things you can do next?
Oh yeah, there's lots of things to go and like think about now. No, it's good. It's great. It's like it's kind of inspiring.
Well, awesome, man. Thanks for doing this with me. I really appreciate it, Matt.
Yeah, it was great chatting with you.
You too, man.